Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and ladies and gentlemen, there's been some crazy stuff today, but I would say what's really exciting to me is we're actually fighting back. People are not complying, ladies and gentlemen, and why are we not complying? Well, today I read something from an operating system, not cigarettes, not an alcohol company, not a gun company. Read this. California residents are not authorized to use Midnight BSD for desktop use in the state of California effective January 1st, 2027. You know what's kind of insane is, like I said, it ain't a cigarette company. It ain't like an alcohol company. It ain't like a gun company. No, we are at a point where operating systems are going, nope. No, we're just not going to serve you anymore. And actually, I'm going to be real with you guys. That's pretty good to see. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Midnight BSD is a BSD-based operating system. For anybody that doesn't know, there's Unix, right? When we look at operating systems, there's something we call Unix. And then from Unix comes several branches, one of them being Linux and one of them being BSD. Midnight BSD is then another branch of that, okay? It's interesting that BSD, Berkeley Systems design, all the way from California back in the 90s, pretty influential. Like, you actually use like a portion of it today if you're touching a Macintosh, probably if you interact with most devices these days. Yeah, one of these guys are just going, listen, man, we're an open source company, okay? We're an open source group of nerds making this OS together. We don't have the time nor the lawyers to deal with this bullshit. So they're not even serving the state of California. Now, the reason why this is good is because when it comes to really shitty laws like we looked at when it comes to California, where they want to put like age verification into the operating system, even if it's something as simple as you report your own age and the operating system sends a signal, basically a law that even if you force companies to implement it, it's so easily circumvented, you might as well wonder, why the fuck would they even make it? Well, it's the reason I think these laws are being made is that it slowly starts to boil the frog into something a little bit more serious. Some dumb politician in California decided to get off their ass and start enforcing computers with no knowledge of how computers worked, by the way, no understanding of fucking anything, penned a law, sent it out, actually had it signed by the governor, and now when they realize, whoa, it does nothing, then they have to go back and make it more and more extreme until it unfortunately actually does do something. And that something is generally not good for most people out there, okay? Now look, I've talked your ear off about, everybody has talked your ear off about this age assurance crap, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it. Obviously, it's problematic. Even when people implement it, there are situations where 14-year-old individuals who are on platforms like Roblox will literally go, listen, without any makeup, they did what the app asked, turn my head this way and that for the photo, and of course, this individual in Brazil, of all places, goes, the app's like, yeah, you're 16, 17 years old. So sometimes the age assurance isn't accurate because it's a fucking computer, okay? Computers are not always accurate, okay? Some people look a little too young for their age. Some people look old for their age. You know what's really funny? Back when I was out of college, I could go to a bar and get a beer. And you know the funniest thing about it? I would be in my 20s, like literally my 20s, so old enough to legally, drink, and I would never get carded. The moment I grew this bad boy, that is the day they stopped carding me. Now look, there were kids that I grew up with in like, I shit you not, middle school, junior high for Americans that actually had one of these, okay? There's this guy I grew up with, Asif or whatever. He had an actual beard. That guy could walk into a bar, get himself a Jack and Coke, and nobody would card him because the guy literally had this, okay? This is like the ultimate cheat code to never get an age verified at a bar. Anyways, all stories aside, all things aside over here, it's good to see that when there's a shitty law, like for instance in California, instead of capitulating to it, it seems that some of the smaller guys, at least, thankfully are using their positions to just leave the state altogether, which I think is insane to even happen in the first place. Like, California is a beautiful place, but unfortunately the people that govern that state just have no fucking idea what to do sometimes, because nobody can understand that when it comes to this level of pervasiveness, this is the Linux GitHub, okay? This is from Linus Torvalds account. 1.4 million commits on this bad boy. This is the Linux kernel tree. This is the basis. People can fork it, they can modify it, they can distribute it however they want. If California wants to force any state to do something, and you don't necessarily have a business entity, you can just leave the state. And for a lot of people who sell or distribute Linux distributions, you can just not serve California. The most they can do is cut off access to your website, which at that point, all people have to do, for instance, if they're using a Linux distribution, can just download from any other area. Even if, for instance, Microsoft or Apple, which they would never leave the state of California because they actually do a lot of business in the fourth largest economy in the world, for them, if they ever wanted to leave, you could still download Windows ISOs. You could still download Mac OS and install it on applicable hardware. That's what these politicians don't fucking understand. It's like, when I was 12 years old, downloading a Ubuntu distribution was something, it was like one of my first scratches into Linux, that and Debian, when I was at 12 years of age. So obviously, kids can do it. Kids, if they, adults, people who care about their privacy, people who care about anything, can just actually go out of their way and download things that are not even government approved. But this is where actually this thing kind of gets scary a little bit too. I was looking at other laws, for instance, and this is from Brazil. Now, some legal experts, some people have said that this is actually even worse than what is happening in California, right? So, for instance, in Brazil, the law provides for the protection of children. It's always for the protection of children and teens in digital environments and applies to any information technology product or service directed at the children and adolescents in the country or likely to be accessed by them, regardless of its location, development, manufacture, offering, marketing, and operation. So again, the purposes of the law, what they actually mentioned here, these following situations are considered probable access. Number one, sufficient likelihood of use and attractiveness of the technology, product, or service. So smartphones, tablets, computers, anything with an operating system. People don't understand, right? When you use the term operating system, you basically mean everything. It doesn't just mean Windows, Mac, Linux, BSD. It actually means anything. Everything basically runs on some level of an operating system. Your television, for instance, has its own operating system. Your butt plug, for instance, probably has its own embedded operating system inside it too. Everything that your washing machine uses it, your Raspberry Pi uses it, your car has an operating system. The level of vagueness that they offer here is just, that's the thing I want to keep bringing up, okay? It's too fucking vague. Number two, considerable ease of access to and use of the information technology product or services by children and adolescents. So literally a computer, literally a smartphone, literally any website you can go to, okay? Whether it be an adult website, whether it be GitHub, whether it be fucking miniclips.com. I don't even know if that's still a thing these days. But of course, number three, significant degree of risk to the privacy, security, and biopsychosocial development of children and adolescents. So obviously, it's a very, very, very in-depth law. And the reality, not in-depth, very vague. But the thing about it is it's so broad that even if you wanted to leave the state of California, I would say the state of California's law that we looked at is probably better written than this. But if you're operating in Brazil, and this is signed now, from my understanding, you might as well leave if you're a small-time fucking developer too. Because most people that are making, especially open source crap, open source stuff, small teams, literally small teams, do not have the money or the time to even challenge the government, especially the state. Like, the state is one thing, a country is something else. It's insanity. And that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to look at. It seems like all of this is happening so rapidly and so much around the world. There's so many attack fronts that the amount of resistance that's happening, it's good to see, but ultimately it makes me wonder, how long is this code of conduct going to eventually get? When is it going to be where California, Colorado, Louisiana, Texas, and then a whole shit pot of other countries are added? The internet is a place where it seems like day by day, they want to take away your identity here. They want to take away your freedom here. And then, of course, when it comes to the software that you're running in your computer, they want to eventually get to the point where even that is invaded on. What's interesting about even California's law, and I didn't talk about this last time. Last time I kind of, I'm sorry that I fell into sort of like a little bit of a conspiracy tier when I looked at and extrapolated how far this can go. Even for things like the Steam Deck, for instance, and I love the Steam Deck, but this is a product that is obviously sold in California. Valve does a lot of business in the state of California. Valve also is producing and distributing one of the largest Linux distributions at this point in time, which is SteamOS. So it makes me wonder if Valve is even compliant. Maybe they are, because Valve asks you for your age at Steam's at Steam's registration process, and maybe that's enough. But at what point is it going to require more? At what point will even SteamOS, down the road, if California ups its requirements, have to become one of the mainline Linux distributions where user privacy and user safety is unfortunately compromised because the government is either too stupid or too evil, and sometimes it can just be a mixture of both against its people. If California put half their efforts into actually bettering their state and the quality of life for their people, this would never even become a talking point. There's people on the BSD forums who are just sitting there wondering, man, why are we even letting this happen, right? Is it just schizophrenia? Is it just some crazy shit? Who really knows? But again, when people say the software is prohibited to be used in California, if that's all it takes to basically wash your hands of any form of liability, that's fine for now, and I'm glad that that resistance is taking place. But ultimately, it does scare me and makes me wonder, how big is that list going to eventually become when every single person does this, right? Even the people on the Linux, development front, people who are in the emailing list, and you can read this stuff for yourself, people have started to ask, it's like, hey, listen, a new law is passed, and it requires you to pass limited info about a user's age via an API. So, of course, obviously, they even talk about how Colorado is doing it. But of course, ultimately, they're even wondering what they're going to do with this. And here, according to the people that develop it, right, they're trying to figure out how this could be implemented, maybe in things like account services, yada, yada, yada. But again, for a lot of the people that are making this kind of stuff, developing Linux, it is genuinely a privacy nightmare. It's a security issue. And it's not just that. It's obviously an issue if you're a Windows user or a Mac user. Remember, we're all kind of together on this, right? This is a bad thing for every single person involved, right? Microsoft might even have an excuse to make sure that anybody making a local Windows account sooner or later will never be able to make one, because they're going to try to make sure that every single person using Microsoft Windows is verified age-wise, whether they're a child or an adult, at the account level, at their actual server level. And maybe the same thing could go for Apple as well, too. You absolutely need an Apple ID in order to use a Mac, in order to use an iPhone, in order to use anything down the road. But again, that's just looking at these two big guys, right? Obviously for Linux, we can still remain underground enough that we can use distributions that don't capitulate to the Californian or Colorado or Brazilian government. But again, if it passes basically everywhere, which it seems like it's getting introduced so rapidly, it makes me wonder what the future is. Even the guys who are behind distributions like Pop! OS, for instance, and I'm not a fan of this, but even on their board, some users are going, are they going to cave to California and Colorado laws? And of course, even the principal engineer for the thing is like, listen, guys, first off, we don't like the law either. But unfortunately, they have to do this. Personally, the guy hates the bill, but the idiot lawmakers push for it. However, it passed unanimously in the Californian Assembly. I would expect similar bills to pass in more states, and it is possible similar legislation would be passed in Europe and everywhere in the near future. Again, that's a serious problem. People are like, oh, it's just California. Don't worry. Just put your shit out of California state. Doesn't matter, bro. If it passes in every fucking state in every country, it is what it is. So of course, I don't believe most free and open source software is ready to handle the ludicrous amount of legal liability this kind of legislation introduces. The talk of non-compliance would be fun if there was not a $7,500 fine per child who uses the OS. So I don't know what California is planning to do there, but imagine if you don't serve California and people do download your distribution, are you going to get fined by a state that you don't do business in? Do you even have to deal with it? Can they ruin your credit that way? It's also another issue to worry about too, right? Legal liability is no fucking joke. So I can assure you all that Pop! OS, like many other systems, will do everything possible to prevent identification of users. So again, the bill doesn't require any identifying information, and again, that's a big yet. It is possible for the minimum implementation to simply not allow the OS to run if the user says they are under 18 and in the state of California. Keep in mind there are no requirements for a user to even tell the truth, and the OS is not liable if they lie about their age. So thankfully, for now, that's why I said it's kind of like a meaningless law because it's so easily circumvented. But the scary thing is, and this is what I've been saying alongside the principal engineer here, the scariest and saddest things about these bills are the scope they have, the lack of technological understanding demonstrated, and how much liability is shifted to OS providers, including those of free and open source system. I am also seriously dismayed by the nonchalant attitude of naive commentators who believe open source is somehow off the hook. Just because it would be better for us all to be off the hook, I would also clarify that the bill does not in any way require unique identification of users to comply with the requirements. There are many options for an OS to implement the requirements without changing the experience, privacy, and security of the vast majority of users. Seriously, my deepest and dearest disdain to Gavin Newsom and the California State Assembly. Which I do tend to agree there. I think it's very scary going forward with how broad these laws are. But look, I've talked your ear off about this a million times. There is, for now, some level of resistance, and there is people who are, leaving the state. It's not that they're not complying, they're just not capitulating and they're pulling their eggs out of this situation. But like the actual principal engineer wrote here, this law is unanimous. Like, people on both sides of the aisle love this shit, okay? They love pushing this stuff off, okay? Somehow politicians can't agree on feeding the fucking poor, dealing with the homeless problems, dealing with serious issues in the country, but they can all come together when it comes to passing something that looks super duper easy, like protecting the children and everything. This is a super serious problem, right? And it's not just, if you think that you live in a state that this can't affect, this could easily pass in a state like Texas. It could easily pass in a state like Florida. It could easily pass in a state like New York. But again, even in Canada, it could easily be implemented in Canada as well too, in the province of Ontario. It could easily be a thing in European countries. It's already becoming a thing in Brazil, for crying out loud. Sooner or later, we're going to have to play whack-a-mole with how we use our computers like we used to use them, right? Because the future is, and look, this is where the conspiracy side of me comes in. I really feel like at some point, there's such a concerted effort from some group at the top of the chain that wants to push the mass surveillance. They want to push the global censorship. They want to push the crazy shit out there, okay? And this is the way to do it, to take away the last bastion of real freedom. When the internet was made, back in the 90s, it created the ability for people to talk to each other in a fraction of a second. And I think that level of power, like when you open Pandora's box, it's like, when you're like somebody that wants to control the people below you, that's the scariest thing to have. And now I feel like in the last year, 2 years, and I've been talking about this since it began. This is not something that I jumped onto as a topic for no reason. I am very passionate about this. There's a reason why I'm making so many videos, because at some point, somebody watching this has to process this in their head and understand that I can't get mad at the people making the operating system. I can only get mad at the politician. And that's the goal of this video. If you feel that anything that I've said is disturbing, pick up a phone, grab a keyboard, get a pen, write to your local state representatives, whether you be in California, Colorado, fuck anywhere. Tell them that you don't like this law. You need it removed, you need it struck down because it's unconstitutional, it's wrong, it's invasive. And I think if enough people do that, if enough people can do that, I personally believe shit like this can see a schism shift towards not happening. But if you don't do anything and you just sit down and pick your ass and fucking say, whatever, shit's bad, it's going to get worse, and you don't do anything, like if you don't do anything, like I'm using my voice to raise awareness, but if you don't do anything, it's just going to keep getting worse. So fight back, do what you have to, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.